Assalamualaikum warahmatullah. Welcome to the third lecture for this course, LMSK 1602, Sastra untuk Kecerdasan Emosi, Literature for Emotional Intelligence. For today's lecture, for this week's lecture, I have a featured poet, Jalaluddin Muhammad Rumi, or better known as Rumi, who was born on the 30th of September 1207 in a place called Balkh. Is that right? Balkh, yeah, which is now Afghanistan. And he passed away on the 17th of December 1273 at Konya, which is now a place in Turkey. Rumi wrote mostly in the language of Persia, in Persian language, as well as in Arabic, but he also wrote Turkish sometimes. And his lyrical poems have since been translated into numerous languages, and obviously the one we'll be using will be in English. But before we begin, I just want to recap some of the previous topics that we have covered in the last two lectures. You had some of these issues that was covered include emotion. What is emotion? What is emotional literacy? What are the characteristics of an emotionally literate person? How do we develop emotional literacy? That was in the first week. And in the second week, we looked at this concept called negativity bias. What is it? How does negativity bias affect us? And how do we overcome negativity bias? And based on these discussions, we also looked at the connection between intrapersonal intelligence as well as emotional intelligence. So those were some of the topics that we covered previously. And to kind of bring it all together to the component of this course, which is emotional intelligence, just want to kind of unpack what is emotional intelligence. So there are main components of emotional intelligence. The first key component is the personal competence, which comprises of self-awareness and self-management. The second key component of EQ is social competence, which comprises of social awareness and relationship management. So it is in the coming together of these four key components: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management or social management. In the coming together of these four key components, we have a more comprehensive idea of what is emotional intelligence. So when we think about the questions that we have been developing so far, which include what is emotion, what is emotional literacy, what are the characteristics of an emotionally literate person, how to develop emotional literacy, what is negativity bias, how does negativity bias affect us, how do we overcome negativity bias. These questions, in fact, help us develop a stronger sense of self-awareness. Okay, so coming back to the components of emotional intelligence. So those questions, in fact, help us develop this aspect of emotional intelligence. Okay, the aspect of self-awareness, and we move towards the aspect of self-management. So what I see in terms of my personal competency, as well as what I do in terms of my personal competency. Okay, so moving forward, I want to start by looking at a particular poem by Rumi, and I want to ask you to, as I'm reading this poem, I would like you to think about your life situation. You know, how satisfied are you with your life? Is there anything you can do to change both yourself and your circumstance, your life circumstance? Okay, so let's read this poem and reflect on those questions. Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I am changing myself. It's very simple, 2-stanza poem, 4 lines each. Just very quickly, if you look at the poem, comparing the first stanza to the second stanza. So in the first stanza, you have, there is a kind of a time change between yesterday, something that happened yesterday, and that's something that's happening today. Okay, so this notion of, excuse me, this notion of yesterday may be immediate yesterday, or it may be your past, right? And this concept called today, it could be this right moment, or it could be the present. So this could be about your past, and this could be about your present. Okay, so the leap between stanza 1 and stanza 2, there is a kind of shift in time, right, from yesterday to today. Then there is another shift also. So the persona I, right? So in the past, the persona was clever. So we need to unpack what that word means. What does being clever mean? I mean, clever means a lot of things, right? Clever could mean you're book smart, right? You are a straight A student, you're book smart. And clever could mean something else as well. So we need to understand the meaning of this stanza before we can understand the meaning of that word. So yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. So being clever and being able to change the world. So what's the link between that? Think about that. Okay, so being clever and being able to change the world. So if you think about, a situation where somebody who is book smart, right, knowledgeable, cognitively, with a high IQ, right? So you're very clever. You are able to change the world through maybe discovery, innovation, invention, exploration, right? So you're able to change the world through these knowledge that you have acquired, right? Through being clever, right? So that was yesterday. Then something happened, right? Today, I am wise, so I am changing myself. So what's the significance here? There is a sense of shift from being clever to being wise, right? So wisdom has another layer of intelligence, right? Wisdom has that layer of intelligence in which you learn from your own experience. You reflect on the experience that you have undergone, and you learn from that. So the wisdom might not necessarily come from textbook. It might come from making mistakes, maybe from your own immediate circumstance and the things that you go through, right? And how that transforms you as a person. So, this is an interesting idea that sometimes this notion of change, right? What is important yesterday, which is you want to change the world, and in order to do that, you become clever, you study, you develop your mind, you change the world. That might have worked in the past for you, but you realize in the present, what you want is not just to be clever, but more than that, to please perhaps be, wise, to be able to exercise a sense of wisdom, maybe, right? And in so doing, you realize that in order to make any kind of change, that wisdom that you have acquired, it comes directly or indirectly through the exploration of the self, and in being able to quote unquote change yourself, you develop a sense of wisdom. So there is a kind of a theme of emotional intelligence in this poem, if you think about it, right? So in order to shift from being clever to being wise, you need to understand certain aspects of yourself in order to be able to change, right? Instead of changing the world but yourself, in order to be able to change yourself, you need to be able to have a level of self-awareness, right? So I want us to kind of keep that theme as we think about improving our emotional intelligence. There is a kind of shift of mindset from, being clever, this development of IQ, to being wise, being able to manage your life and your circumstance better, i.e. developing emotional intelligence. So, let's connect that to this concept of emotional intelligence. Let's connect that poem to this concept of emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence, as I spoke about earlier, is this, coming together of the self and the society, the concepts of self and society, the social. You have, for the self, you have, the level of self-awareness and self-management. This is a key component of emotional intelligence, focusing on the self. And then for the social, there is the element of social awareness and social skills. So let's understand it a little bit. So when we talk about self-awareness, we are basically looking at a recognition of the I, right? Understanding your moods, understanding your emotions, what drives you, what makes you sad, what makes you angry, what makes you depressed, what makes you happy, right? Then the second and key component, which is what we're going to focus on for today, is self-management, right? Which is, how do I regulate my emotions and my moods, right? How do I maintain it? How do I make it not too depressed and down and low, and not too high and excited that I forget myself? You want to be grounded. In order to do that, you need to be able to manage what? You need to be able to manage and control your impulses and your moods. Some of our impulses can be disruptive. It can be counterproductive, right? Like when you are angry, and if you're not able to control that anger, it can cause you to do things. It can cause you to maybe, damage relationships. Say things to the person you're angry at. Say things that is so hurtful that you can't take it back, right? You can't take those words back. So managing your emotion, managing your moods is an important element of emotional intelligence. So, since it's so important, what are possible steps that we could take in order to manage our emotional state, our emotional and mood, emotions and mood better, right? So what are some steps that you can take for greater self-management? So the first key step would be to ask yourself the tough questions, right? Tony Robbins is a self-help guru, author, motivational speaker. He's got his own company. He runs training all around the world for many decades now. One of the key things that he says that has stayed with me is this quote: "The quality of your life is a direct reflection of the quality of questions you are asking yourself." So if you think about it, within the context of our discussion of emotional intelligence, of self-management, what kind of questions can you ask yourself in order for you to better understand yourself, right? Going back to Rumi's poem, right? Being able to be wise, being able to change yourself, you need to start with yourself, right? Change doesn't happen from outside in, change happens from inside out, right? So in order to change, in order to make certain improvement in your life, the first thing to do is to ask these tough questions. How am I doing? Am I happy with the way I'm living my life, right? Am I happy with my circumstance? What can I do to make myself be happier? What can I do to improve my situation, my circumstance? So you need to ask yourself tough questions. You begin with you. You got to start with yourself, right? So, earlier when I went through the topics that we've covered the last couple of weeks, you notice I put it together in the form of questions, all right? Because I think questions actually help trigger a lot of ideas in our mind, both cognitively as well as in our mindfulness in the way we perceive our life and our circumstance. So asking questions helps us be able to have something to focus on, something to target. So, make time to ask yourself, how am I doing? And see what kind of response you get, and journal about that. Are you happy with your current situation, your current circumstance? Just, ask yourself, what questions do you want to ask yourself about your state of life and your state of being? Ask these questions. The second step, The second step, which I think is equally crucial, I want you to kind of have a look at this particular quote. This quote comes from the book To Kill a Mockingbird. It's one of my favorite novels by Harper Lee. And in this particular quote, Scott is this girl, right? And this is a line from the book. Until I feared I would lose it, I never loved to read. One does not love breathing. I just want to kind of help you see that significance of that. Until I feared I would lose it, I never loved to read. What are some things that you never considered losing, right? And because of that, you might take it for granted, right? Like, for instance, breathing, right? We don't really consider breathing as something that we love to do, right? Because we do it, whether consciously or unconsciously. Our body, thank God for that, is wired in a way to breathe, right? Just like your eyes are wired to blink, because otherwise it will dry up. Okay, so one of the things to do to develop greater level of emotional intelligence and focusing primarily in the component of the self, right? Self-awareness and self-management, besides asking yourself tough questions about your state of being, about how are you doing, and are you happy with your life, and what can you do to improve your life, asking these tough questions. The second key step would be to actually identify what are some things that you never considered losing, but when you think about it, if you lost it, you'll be very, very upset. You'll be very lost, like breathing. In this excerpt, Scott actually loves to read, but she never considered reading as something that she needs to feel blessed about, because she took it for granted because she could read, right? If somebody told you that you cannot read ever, would that make you feel sad? Would that make you feel like you've lost something precious? So I want you to think about, for step number 2, I want you to think about what are some things in life that you may inadvertently take for granted. You don't go around taking it for granted, but you've never appreciated it much. For instance, your health, your financial state, your spiritual state, your emotional state, your psychological state, your relationships, your environment, your home. Today we got news about one of our Palestinian students who is currently in Gaza, and there was a picture of where his home was and where the destruction was near his home, and it's amazing to note that where his home is just a few feet away from where the airstrikes hit in the recent bombings in Gaza by the Israelis. Things like that, you don't take it, you don't appreciate it much until you realize you may lose it. Your home, for instance. So we live in an environment where, thank God, it's peaceful. We don't have wars, we don't have destructions, we don't have natural disasters. Currently we are going through pandemic, and that is robbing a lot of us, maybe health wise, maybe emotionally and psychologically we're affected by it. But if we didn't have all these things, we take a lot of things for granted. So there's a lot of things that we need to appreciate in our lives, So reflect on this topic, and I want you to kind of make a list for yourself. Make a comprehensive list. What are some things you take for granted, right? Including breathing, including the fact that you could swallow, right? Imagine if you can't swallow your saliva. Imagine what that feels like, right? You have water to drink. Imagine, because we've just finished the month of Ramadan. How did that feel like to fast, right? And how did that feel like when you had food to break your fast? Imagine you didn't have that. So for this step number 2, just sit down and make a list of all the things that you take for granted, that you didn't realize you take for granted. But if you lost it, you will definitely feel the pressure of the loss. Yeah. So that's step number 2. Step number 3 would be to convert those things that you feared losing into a kind of a blessing, right? So in that excerpt that I showed earlier, Scott realized that she would fear the loss of reading. If she couldn't read anymore, she would feel the loss of it. So what do you think you would fear, and how the fact that you are not lost yet from it, it's now your blessing? For instance, the fact that you can breathe, the fact that you can blink your eyes, the fact that you can move, the fact that you can sleep at night, right? I mean, I know some people who are chronic insomniacs, right? They cannot sleep, and that is such a blessing, is it not? To be able to sleep, to be able to put your head on the pillow at night and get a few hours rest. Imagine not being able to do that. So for step number 3, I want you to kind of look at the things that you take for granted and make that into a blessing. Make it into part of the list of things that you are grateful for. And science backs it up as well, that people who make time to express gratitude daily, in fact, are known to have a reduced level of impatience, depression, blood pressure. Their sleep is a lot better. They develop a strong sense of mindfulness and empathy, among other things. That there are over 28 benefits. Right, this particular article by Ackerman 2020 illustrates that. So step 3, look at the list of things that you take for granted and convert them into your blessings. Step 4. This is something I'm very fascinated by. This idea that we make our habits before the habit makes us. Okay, so we first make our habits, then our habits make us. So this idea that when somebody says, why do you do that? Oh, it's just my habit. Why do you sleep late? Oh, it's just my habit. Why do you wake up late? It's just my habit. Why do you skip breakfast? It's just it's just my habit. That's the way I've been for many years now. So there are some habits that are good because it helps us live a more productive life, a more positive life, a more hopeful life, right? But then again, there are habits that are not necessarily healthy or good for us, but we have been doing it, practicing it for so long that it becomes a second nature and we don't even think about it, right? Like for instance, every time you're feeling down, maybe you reach for food. That's your comfort, it's your go-to. Maybe you drink, you go for soft drinks, every time you're feeling down, or that's your go-to thing. Maybe you have other things that you do which might not necessarily be healthy for you, right? So for step 4, I want you to consider 5 activities that you now consciously think about you must do regularly. You make a list, 5 things that you must do regularly. So these are some suggestions. Learn something new daily, right? Maybe go on a podcast. On Spotify there are numerous podcasts, short podcasts in 5 minutes, 10 minutes. You could learn something, right? Maybe you could exercise for 20 minutes. Maybe just go for a walk, brisk walk for 20 minutes daily. Another one would be, maybe you have not been keeping in touch with your loved ones, right? Maybe you could speak to them more often. Maybe you could leave them a message or two daily, right? Another example of an activity that you could do regularly, which you might not be for now, is to kind of just go into nature. Okay, right now with the current MCO, that's not going to be conducive, I realize. But you could always just look out your window and observe the natural world. Okay, this is something I love to do. I love to look at clouds and birds flying. There's something about them, and trees. I love trees. So observe the wonders of the natural world daily. So like you put it down in your reminder on your phone. These are some things I'm going to do daily. You could meditate daily, 15-20 minutes. You could read daily, 30 minutes. That's my thing. At night before I turn in, I must read for at least 30 to 30. 30 is a minimum for me. 30 to 60 minutes, it's like, that's my go-to thing. 10 to 11, that's my reading time. And I feel like something is missing if I don't do that, So that's become my habit. It could also be journaling. That's something, because journaling is something I really want to kind of promote for you. And if some of you have already been journaling, you may want to kind of continue with these ideas that I've given you on what to journal about. So anyway, these are some suggestions. I want you to create your 5 activities that you will promise yourself you're going to do regularly, okay? And I want you to share those 5 activities on our Telegram as well as on UKM Folio, okay? Right, now step 5. Have a look at this quote from Rumi before we go into step 5. Maybe you are searching among the branches for what only appears in the roots. Okay, this is another very deep philosophical quote from Rumi, right? But let's unpack that, right? There's this notion of branches and roots. There is this literal idea of a tree with branches and roots, but it is also a metaphor for something. Okay, so if you look at this picture, it's a beautiful picture of a tree. You notice the branches are short, the leaves have all fallen off, right? And the trunk and the branches are all above the ground, things that you can see, right? And the roots are like so beautiful, right? It's got a kind of a pattern of its own. it looks like it's a kind of a treasure underground, but they are all underground. They are all covered up. You can't really see it. So if you think about the external and the internal in this form, you may be able to see the concept of branch and roots as a metaphor. So think about that. Maybe you are searching among the branches, i.e., maybe you're searching externally, outwardly, for what only appears in the roots, i.e., internally. So again, it's that binary of outside, inside, external, internal, right? So Rumi tends to kind of focus on that quite a bit. The idea of to know yourself is to explore what's within you, not what's outside of you, right? And this idea of searching and understanding begins from within rather than without. Then on that note, step number 5, if you remember the first four steps, that brings you to step number 5. Step number 5 is to understand your character strength. So picking up from Rumi's quote, which is, maybe you're searching among the branches for what only appears in the roots. So what is the thing that appears in the roots, i.e. within, is your strength. What is it that you are searching for externally? This show of strength, proudness of your ability to do things. Your strength is drawn from within, your character, right? So for step number 5, you will have to do a couple of things. Number 1 is to take a survey on character strength. So this survey was set up by Professor Martin Seligman and his colleagues, and they came up with 24 character strengths based on their studies across different cultures around the globe. The survey is for free. All you have to do is register, and then you can take the survey for free, and they'll send you the results. The survey itself will help you identify which of the 24 character strengths is your top. All of us will have all the 24 strengths, but which ones clearly define us, which would be your top 10, your top 5, for instance. Okay, so take the survey. Then step 6, once you've got the survey, have a look at the results and then choose your top 5 character strengths. Okay, so take the first 5 from your results, and for each of the character, the top 5, identify one activity that you can do regularly to further improve that particular trait. Okay, and then put it in the form of a table. So you've got the 5 character strengths, and for each one, identify one activity that you will do regularly. So let's have a look at the character strength. So I just type VIA character survey, then you go to that website, character strength survey. You fill up your details, and then you take the survey. Once you've taken the survey, you will get an email about the report. And once you've got your report, you can read up more about each one. For instance, maybe your character strength, your top 5 character strength, one of which is humor. You love to be playful with life. You love to make people laugh. You love to crack jokes, and you find that is your way out, especially when times are difficult and stressful. So if that's your character strength, learn how to incorporate that in your everyday life, right? Read up a little bit more and find out what else can I do to make humor as something I do regularly. Okay, so there are, like I said, there are 24 of them. Maybe yours is one of your top is kindness. What does kindness mean? What are acts of kindness that you can do on a regular basis? Explore that, read up more about each character strength, and try out, see where these activities land you, and you may find that these activities converge, the ones that you identified earlier, making your habit. You might find that some of these 5 activities are the same ones that you can in fact incorporate in your top 5 character strength. Okay, so share with us your findings on UKM Folio as well as on Telegram, and let me know if you've got any questions. Okay, I'll see you soon.